When thinking of the national parks, our mind sends us on a journey to some of the most iconic vistas in America. But below the surface lies an unseen world. These are the cultural and scientific treasures that make up the underwater wonders of the national parks. Buck Island Reef National Monument, a mile and a half from the shores of St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, was declared a national monument due to its vibrant elkhorn coral. The National Park Service has been responsible for maintaining and managing the 176-acre island with its world-class beaches, critical turtle nesting grounds, and the surrounding 19,000 acres of underwater reefs, making it one of the most scientifically and culturally rich landmarks in the national park system. But natural and man-made dangers have put these 8,000 to 10,000-year-old coral colonies at serious risk.
When the park was created in 1962, the coral percent cover was in the 50 to 60%, focusing mostly on that barrier reef, which was created by one coral species, elkhorn coral. So over time, there have been a number of impacts to that reef, and coral cover was down to less than 5%.
These complex yet fragile ecosystems are weakened by more frequent and powerful hurricanes and stressed from overfishing and pollution. Their increased exposure to higher ocean surface temperatures causes coral bleaching, leaving the communities susceptible to a wide variety of infections, many of them lethal.
Sometimes it feels like you're just monitoring the death of something, and that can be very unsettling and sort of depressing. And so it's great to have an opportunity to work on something that actually might be able to reverse this trend.
Yellow band disease and dark spot syndrome are some of the biggest dangers to the coral, easily identified by its sickly yellow and burnt appearance. Once infected, the disease progresses through an entire colony, leaving behind a dead reef. In collaboration with outside partners, researchers have been fighting yellow band disease by chiseling away the infected tissue in hopes of slowing its progression.
And by creating that physical barrier, we're able to stop the spread of disease in 60% of the disease colonies that were sampled.
And around it, you'll see this chiseled region. And on some of these colonies, you'll see the disease has hit the edge of that and then stopped. And you'll see the nice green or sort of orange, healthy looking tissue on the outside with this ugly disease tissue that has just stopped and has not crossed over that barrier.
The elkhorn coral in some parts of the reef come back from scratch, come back from zero, and regrow into colonies that are 2 meters across in size, upwards of 6-8 feet.
Buck Island Reef National Monument is also a critical spawning ground and habitat to a wide range of marine species. Park science stewards have constructed an acoustic array project to study animal movement and behavior within the monument and between adjacent parks and waters. Selected species are inserted with an acoustic tag underwater, allowing them to be tracked. The data collected from the 111 underwater receivers provides useful information on the movement of endangered, threatened, and potentially invasive species, like the lionfish, who with no known predators kill off smaller reef fish that are essential to maintaining the environment. The Acoustic Tagging Project and yellow band disease programs are both a prime example of the intersection between the science and stewardship missions of the National Park Service. And while scientists flock to the reefs in hopes of studying the unique Buck Island marine environment, an international team of archaeologists, led by the National Park Service, is hoping to catch a glimpse of something entirely different within the reefs.
And we've got GPS. Can we plug in the mag?
2 vessels of the transatlantic slave trade that traveled over 4,000 miles from the shores of Africa, only to meet their fate 1.5 miles from their destination.
St. Croix was an endpoint for the transport of enslaved people across the Atlantic Ocean. And they came here, they were combined here, and they were sold here and redistributed elsewhere throughout the Caribbean, into South America and into North America as well.
Over 100 slave wrecks, ships went down in the Virgin Islands. We know of 2 at Buck Island. Although those ships are long submerged and probably long forgotten, we still are charged and responsible for telling that story. Even here at Christiansted, as you look behind me, was the largest slave market compound, still standing under the U.S. flag and in the National Park System. And so we are doing archaeology on land to uncover those cultural resources, but it's really unique that we get an opportunity to go into the water and get those submerged cultural resources that also fit into the story of the transatlantic slave trade.
The National Park Service and its partners are hoping to uncover the remnants of 2 particular shipwrecks in the waters of Buck Island. The Mary, an 18th century British vessel traveling from Africa, ran aground on the treacherous reefs of Buck Island in 1797. The General Abercrombie, also a British ship, sank in 1803. When they perished, the Mary's onboard cargo included 244 enslaved people, while the General Abercrombie held 339.
When people think about shipwrecks, what they really think about is a Walt Disney Pirates of the Caribbean ship sitting on the bottom of the ocean with the wheel still intact and a chest of pirate gold. And that's really not what shipwrecks look like, especially in a relatively shallow area like we're seeing at Buck Island. In the shallow water, there's a lot of surge and energy from waves and currents. So anything that's standing up above the bottom actually ends up breaking down and getting carried away and getting beaten up. And so what we're finding when we're looking for shipwrecks, we're finding very, very small pieces or even parts of shipwrecks.
Saltwater shipworms, who bore and destroy wood, alongside the rough currents of the Caribbean Sea, make the search for these ships extremely challenging. Fortunately, advanced maritime technologies are doing their part to help the National Park Service on their hunt.
Okay, forward on port.
We're good? All right, starboard in gear. And we're searching for anomalies in the normal magnetic field of the Earth's environment around an island.
We want the instrument as close as possible to the seafloor, which hopefully is as close to the shipwreck material as we can get it. As it's being towed through the water, it is constantly reading. It almost looks like a heart monitor. And when it detects something, it may spike up and spike down. And all of that is fed through the screen cable into the laptop in front of Jess at the helm. And she can see the data coming in constantly.
With over 100 potential sites identified, the crew is optimistic that remnants from the Mary and the General Abercrombie are only a dive away. And while they've yet to find any evidence, there have been surprising discoveries.
The most significant thing we found so far are a variety of anchors, 2 side by side, different time periods. One is laying flat and one is actually hooked in. The one that's laying flat is bent, which is interesting. That won't say what ship it came from, but it will help us tell the story of the maritime landscape here. With all these different anchors from various time periods, we can get some information from it, but it isn't going to be the identifying factor for that vessel.
And the anchors are in some ways kind of like a skid mark before a car crash. So the ships come in and they see a shallow reef like Buck Island, and the captain says, oh no, we're gonna crash on the reef, and they throw out an anchor, and maybe they stop, maybe they don't stop, but you know, sometimes they cut the line to the anchor and leave it there.
From historical records, the scientists know that miraculously, no slaves lost their lives during the actual sinking of the ships. But there would be no preventing a destiny of a life filled with hardship and misery.
On one hand, we have the scientific aspect. We're studying yellow band disease. We're studying an ecosystem of declining fish population, not just in Buck Island, but in the wider Caribbean basin. But then there's also the other story of maritime slavery coming through, and it is our obligation to tell that story as well.
The history of the slave trade is it's not forgotten history, it's intentionally buried history. It's not history that anyone wants to talk about. We have a whole bunch of different people all working to bring this history back to light, to examine it, to think about it, and to learn from it.